Clara Thompson had spent 15 long years pushing her mop and bucket through the gleaming halls of Pinnacle Enterprises. She knew every inch of that high-rise office, from the spotless marble floors to the cluttered desks of overworked employees. But to the executives in their tailored suits, she was invisible, just the cleaning lady. They brushed past her without a second glance, their polished shoes clicking against the floors she scrubbed every night. She heard their whispered conversations, saw the discarded papers they thought no one would notice. She was always watching, always listening. And then came the moment that changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning when Victor Lang, the all-powerful CEO, strutted into the lobby with his usual arrogance, flanked by his entourage. A spilled coffee stain near the elevators caught his eye, and without missing a beat, he sneered in Clara's direction. "Clean it up, Grandma." The words stung like a slap. The laughter that followed echoed through the grand hall, bouncing off the walls like a cruel joke. Clara gripped her mop tighter, her face burning with humiliation. She could have snapped back, could have let her anger explode in that moment, but instead she bit her tongue, lowered her head, and cleaned the mess. That night, as she walked through the silent offices, the city skyline glowing beyond the towering windows, she made herself a promise. This will be the last time he laughs at me. Little did Victor know, the woman he just humiliated was the one person who had the power to bring him down. Clara Thompson had spent years enduring silence, her presence nothing more than a blur in the background of Pinnacle Enterprises. But that morning, as she stood frozen in the lobby, mop in hand, face burning with humiliation, she knew something inside her had snapped. Victor Lang's cruel voice still rang in her ears. "Clean it up, Grandma." The way he smirked, the way the staff laughed along with him, as if she was nothing more than the dirt she scrubbed off the floor. She swallowed the lump in her throat, forced her hands to keep moving, but in that moment she made a decision. He would regret this day. What Victor didn't know, what no one knew, was that Clara wasn't just a cleaning lady. 15 years ago, when her beloved uncle passed away, he left her something no one could have imagined: a massive shareholding in Pinnacle Enterprises. It was a secret she had kept locked away, watching as Victor turned the company into his personal empire, firing good people, making backroom deals, and shredding papers he thought no one would ever see. But Clara had seen it all. That night she pulled out her phone and made a call. Thomas Time. Across town, over a plate of greasy fries in a dimly lit diner, Clara laid it all out: the layoffs, the fraud, the corruption, and the final insult that had pushed her over the edge. Tom, a sharp-eyed lawyer and an old friend, leaned in, barely able to contain his grin. "Clara, you're the majority shareholder. You have the power to end this." Her heart pounded. The humiliation of that morning had been painful, but her revenge would be unstoppable. The boardroom was buzzing, suits everywhere, voices low, tension thick in the air. At the head of the long mahogany table, Victor Lang sat like a king, leaning back in his chair, smirking, confident. To him, this was just another routine shareholders' meeting, another day of boasting about profits he built on cutbacks, layoffs, and broken promises. What he didn't know, what he couldn't even imagine, was that his reign was seconds away from crumbling. Clara Thompson stood outside the boardroom doors, her fingers tightening around the handle of her cart. She could feel her heart pounding, the weight of 15 years pressing against her ribs. Today was the day. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a single word from Tom: "Now." She stepped forward, pushing her mop bucket ahead of her, just as she had done for over a decade. Heads turned, confused glances were exchanged. What was the cleaning lady doing here? Victor barely looked up. "What's she doing in here?" he scoffed. Clara took a deep breath, stepped forward and locked eyes with him. "I'm not just the cleaning lady, Victor. I own this company." The room went silent. Victor let out a hollow laugh, shaking his head. "Nice joke, sweetheart. Get back to your mop." She didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her folder and slammed the evidence onto the table: financial fraud, illegal layoffs, emails where he called employees disposable. Faces went pale. Victor's smirk vanished. Clara straightened her back, voice calm but firm. "You're fired, Victor, right now." For the first time in 15 years, she was the one giving the orders. Victor Lang stormed out of the boardroom, his face red with rage, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. Just hours ago he had walked into Pinnacle Enterprises as the all-powerful CEO, untouchable, feared. Now, he was nothing, stripped of his title, his power, his empire, by the very woman he had mocked. Claire watched him go, her mop bucket rattling one last time as she stood victorious, but she wasn't finished yet. She turned back to the stunned board members, their eyes flickering between her and the folder of evidence that had just shattered their world. No more silence, no more fear. "Things changed today," she said, her voice steady. For 15 years she had watched good people lose their jobs while Victor bought himself another yacht. She had scrubbed the floors while executives laughed about cutting the fat. No more. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and turned the screen toward the room. A photo of the cleaning crew, the people who kept this company running while being treated as invisible. These people deserve raises, starting now. A moment of hesitation. Then, slowly, someone clapped, then another, and another. For the first time in her life, Clara wasn't invisible anymore. By evening, the headlines lit up her phone screen. CEO ousted in shareholder coup. Then it got better. Regulators had seen the leaks. Victor's accounts were frozen. His yacht was seized. His empire crumbling. She sat back on her couch, exhaled, and smiled. Justice had never felt so good. The air inside Pinnacle Enterprises felt different the next morning. For the first time in years, there was no tension, no hushed whispers of fear. The toxic presence of Victor Lang was gone. Clara Thompson walked through the halls, but this time she wasn't wearing her uniform. No mop, no bucket, just jeans and a sweater, and the newfound respect of every person she passed. The cleaning crew spotted her first. "You really did it, Clara," one of them said, handing her a steaming cup of coffee. She took it with a laugh. The first genuine laugh in years. No one was looking down on her anymore. Later that day, she stepped into Victor's old office. The same office she had dusted and mopped night after night while he sat inside, barking orders, treating people like numbers on a spreadsheet. Now, the desk was hers. She sat down, took a deep breath, and started signing papers. Raises for the cleaning crew, new ethical policies, a culture shift that would finally value the people who actually ran this company. By noon, word had spread. Reporters flooded her inbox. Former employees sent messages of thanks. One email stood out. From a janitor Victor had fired years ago for asking for a sick day. "You gave us our dignity back, Clara. Thank you." She blinked back tears. That night, she met Tom at their usual diner. He slid his phone across the table. "You're trending, Clara. Cleaning lady CEO, it's everywhere." She shook her head with a smile. "I just wanted Victor gone." Tom grinned. "You did more than that. You woke up an entire company." Victor Lang was not a man who went down quietly. Clara knew that. She had expected him to lash out, to throw a tantrum, to grasp at whatever scraps of power he had left, but she hadn't expected the sheer spectacle of his downfall. A month after she took over Pinnacle Enterprises, Victor appeared on a second-rate cable talk show, still clinging to whatever dignity he thought he had left. He sat there, fuming, spitting out one last desperate attempt at revenge. "She's a fraud, a sneaky janitor who stole my company." Clara had been sipping tea in her office when the clip popped up on her phone. She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. But then, the host of the show, barely containing a smirk, pulled up security footage from the day she had fired him. The video played. There was Victor Lang, the once mighty CEO, shoving papers off his desk, knocking over his chair, screaming at the top of his lungs like a petulant child. Clara nearly choked on her tea. Within hours, the internet had a field day. Memes flooded social media. One clip titled "When You Lose Your Job and Your Yacht" racked up millions of views. Victor had officially become a joke. By the end of the week, his last business partners had cut ties, his lawsuit against Clara thrown out of court, his assets dried up. Last she heard, he was selling condos in some nowhere town, clinging to whatever scraps of wealth he had left. Meanwhile, Clara was still at Pinnacle, not as a janitor, but as the woman who had brought the company back to life. She wasn't just cleaning floors anymore. She had cleaned house. A year had passed since Clara Thompson had walked into the boardroom and changed everything. Pinnacle Enterprises wasn't the same company anymore. The fear, the tension, the cold silence that had once ruled the halls, it was gone. Instead, there was something new in the air. Pride, respect, fairness. Clara walked the same floors she had mopped for 15 years, but this time, she wasn't just another invisible worker. This time, people looked her in the eye, they smiled, they greeted her with warmth instead of indifference. She passed the break room, pausing at the small framed note on her desk, the very first employee suggestion she had received as CEO. More coffee in the break room. She chuckled to herself. Such a simple request, yet under Victor Lang's rule, even something that small would have been ignored. But not anymore. The employees mattered now. Their voices mattered. Clara had given raises to the cleaning crew, introduced fairer policies, and made sure no one was ever treated like she had been. And the result? People were happier, more productive. They actually wanted to be there. The best part? One afternoon, Miguel, one of the janitors she had worked alongside for years, stopped her in the hall. His eyes were shining. "Clara, my daughter saw you on TV," he said. "She told me she wants to be just like you someday." The words hit her harder than she expected. She smiled, blinking back tears. Tell her to be better than me? Because this fight hadn't just been about taking down Victor. It had been about proving that the people who built a company deserved to be seen, respected, and valued. Victor Lang refused to disappear. Even after being publicly humiliated, after losing his company, his fortune, and his reputation, he still couldn't let it go. He clung to his anger like a drowning man grasping at broken pieces of his former empire. And Clara? She saw it coming. One evening, as she walked home, she noticed a figure lingering too close, too quiet, a shadow where there shouldn't have been one. Then, her phone rang. "Clara, it's Tom." His voice was low, urgent. "Victor's been asking around about you. Stay sharp." Her stomach tightened, but she didn't panic. She had spent years being ignored, underestimated. People like Victor never saw people like her as a threat until it was too late. And now he was grasping at one last pathetic attempt to take her down. The next morning, a lawyer showed up at Pinnacle Enterprises with a lawsuit in hand. "Mr. Lang is claiming you manipulated the shareholders to steal his company," the man said, barely able to keep a straight face. Clara didn't even blink. She reached into her desk drawer, pulled out a neatly filed document, and slid it across the table. "That's my uncle's will, notarized, legal, clean." Tom sat beside her, smirking. The lawyer skimmed the pages, his expression shifting from confidence to discomfort. Minutes later, he left empty-handed. By noon, the news broke. Victor's case had been thrown out as frivolous. His legal fees piled up, his last allies abandoned him. This time, he was truly done. Clara leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. She had fought her battle. And she had won. For good. A year had passed, and Pinnacle Enterprises had never been stronger. Clara Thompson still walked the same halls, but now she belonged there in a way she never had before. There was no mop in her hands, no uniform that made her invisible. Instead, people nodded in respect, their smiles genuine. Employees, the same ones who had once looked through her as if she were part of the furniture, now greeted her like an equal, like a leader. The layoffs? Gone. The toxic culture? Erased. One afternoon, she stood in her office. Victor Lang's old office, though it felt nothing like his anymore. She glanced at the small framed note on her desk. More coffee in the break room. She had laughed when she received that first employee suggestion, but she honored it anyway, because that was the point. Everyone deserved to be heard. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. Miguel, one of the janitors she had worked alongside for years, stepped inside. "Clara," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "my daughter saw you on TV. She told me she wants to be just like you someday." Clara felt something tighten in her chest. She had never sought fame or recognition. She had only wanted justice. But this was bigger. She smiled, swallowing the lump in her throat. Tell her to be better than me. Because in the end, this fight had never been just about taking down Victor Lang. It had been about proving that the people who built a company deserved to be seen, valued, and respected. The power of patience, dignity, and justice. Clara Thompson's story is a testament to the power of patience, quiet observation, and unwavering self-respect. For years, she endured being overlooked, dismissed, and even humiliated. Yet, instead of lashing out, she waited, watched, and planned. When the moment was right, she acted decisively and with integrity, proving that true strength doesn't always come from loud voices. It comes from wisdom, resilience, and knowing your worth. For many seniors, Clara's journey resonates deeply. How often have we been underestimated simply because of age, experience, or circumstance? How many times have we had to bite our tongues, knowing that time would reveal the truth? Her story reminds us that respect isn't given, it's earned, through action, perseverance, and standing for what's right. More importantly, Clara didn't just fight for herself. She fought for others, ensuring those who were once ignored would be seen. In life, it's not just about personal victories. It's about leaving a legacy of fairness and dignity for those who come after us. So if you ever feel invisible, remember, the quietest person in the room may hold the most power.